the issue in this country right now is we live in different realities.
That's right.
I live in a reality where I know I do not have the same opportunity as you. I know I don't.
And you know
and
that
I know
too.
what's going.
And you know that.
Let me just tell you about me.
I'm gonna let you finish, but I wanna answer this.
I'm not talking about how you feel. I'm talking about how I feel. Me, a black woman in this country.
And not in this city.
And I will run. And if you
Look,
want,
I'm a New Yorker, not in this city. You cannot say that. You can't say that in this city. But
I'm not talking about New York. I'm talking about actually right here. I got a law degree, a master's, and 2 bachelors. Probably more education than all of y'all added up together on this table, right? And I have always been the least paid person on payroll at every institution I have worked in. And it's not
Even
because
in the White House?
Even in the White House.
Well, whose fault is that? I don't think you worked for George W. or Trump.
Well, guess what happened when I was there? DEI.
Hey YouTube, so I'm going to share a clip, and this clip inspired me and it motivated me to have a conversation about very important topics, but very sensitive topics in our country. I want to talk about racism. I want to talk about bigotry. I want to talk about our different systems in our country. Whether it's the healthcare system, our education system, our criminal justice system. I want to talk about voter suppression. I want to talk about these things, and I want to articulate, at least from my understanding and my perspective, why these conversations are difficult to have, but are extremely important to have. So, in the clip that you've seen, you had a woman, her name is Ashley. She's a black woman, and the conversation was regarding DEI, and they were having a conversation about Trump's administration and basically his administration attack on DEI. By extension, they've already kind of got rid of affirmative action, and so the affirmative action and DEI kind of correlates, and I'll explain the correlation. But Ashley was basically telling the panel, she is a lawyer. She has a master's degree. She has 2 bachelor's degrees, and she was still saying she has still been paid less in the jobs that she's held. And I identify with that. That resonated with me in ways I can't even explain. Just a little bit of background about myself. I do have a bachelor's degree in finance. I've been working in corporate America for I'm old, child. I've been working in corporate America for about 19 years. About 19 years. And I cannot tell you how many times that I was looked over for promotions, that I had to train people who were less qualified, who had less credentials, that were making more money than me. I've been through the unimaginable. And I have some stories on my page. I have a Navigating Corporate America series on my page. There's 3 videos that I've done so far that kind of speak to those disparities, those situations that I've been in. But this clip, I've watched this clip like 5 times because it resonated with me on a level that I can't even articulate. It resonated with me because it felt very much like my story. Now, she has more credentials than I have in regards to the fact that she's a lawyer, the fact that she has a master's degree, the fact that she has 2 bachelors. However, the same story of being overqualified but undervalued is a story that I believe a lot of black women and black people in general can attest to. And so I wanted to have this conversation on my page because this is something that I live. This is something that's very important to me, and this is something that I want to articulate in a way that I'm not judging, I'm not criticizing, I'm not trying to offend people. But education shouldn't be offensive. And to educate someone just on facts, just letting a person know these are my experiences. Because I think one major, I think there's 2, but I think one major issue in America is that we're not educated on other people's contributions, their people contribution to the nation. So it's easy to otherize, it's easy to minimize, it's easy to demoralize when you don't know someone else's contribution to the nation. If you don't know where I come from, you don't know what my ancestors, my people have contributed to this country, it's easy to minimize who I am, and it's easy to otherize me, to believe that I don't deserve the things that you have or that you deserve because I didn't contribute, or my ancestors or people that look like me didn't contribute the way that people who look like you contributed. So I believe education is one of the major factors. Lack of education, I believe Americans, and I know this is not easy to hear, it's not necessarily easy to say because I'm an American as well, but Americans are poorly educated. They're poorly educated, and we, instead of embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, people run away from it and they bastardize it, and they make it a negative when it can be a positive. So I thought that it was important for me to just talk about these issues, talk about them through my lens, the way I see them, being a Black woman in America, navigating corporate America, and all the experiences that I've had. And so I want to break this up in 3 parts. First, I want to differentiate racism and bigotry, because I think people have a very difficult time differentiating those things. I think they think they're the same, and they are not. Racism is more about institutions and systems. Racism is about systematic oppression. It's being able to withhold opportunities because of somebody's skin color, because of their socioeconomic class, racism, because there is racism, sexism, classism, all the isms, right? Racism is about race. And it's basically to otherize someone or to be able to hold opportunities from someone because of their race. That's racism. But we're talking that is institutional, systematic. When you talk about bigotry is a hatred, a disregard, or demoralizing someone based on how they identify. This person is a Black woman. So a bigoted statement is, I think Black women are stupid. That's bigoted. Racism is more about institutions and systems. And so when you look at things like that and you learn to differentiate things from that perspective, I think you'll have more clarity. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, and I wrote this down because I don't want to forget anything. So the first segment, we're going to talk about systematic racism. I have 6 categories that I kind of want to speak to just a little bit. The first category is racial disparities in our criminal justice system. The second category is racial profiling. The third category is housing discrimination. The fourth category is employment discrimination. The fifth category is healthcare disparities. And the sixth category is voter suppression. All of those things are systems. It's systematic racism. It's institutional racism. These are systems that have inherent biases based on skin color, based on other things as well, but skin color is a major factor. And so in this country, I believe you can hold 2 ideas in your head. I believe America is the greatest nation. I do believe that. However, we have a lot of issues in this country. And instead of learning, engaging, trying to fix, we run from it. So it's the reason why DEI is bastardized. It's the reason why affirmative action is looked at as a bad thing. Is because a lot of people don't know, they don't know about these programs. They know about it in a very shallow, kind of high level way. But affirmative action was created. So let's take a step back. So affirmative action basically gave opportunity to people who were qualified but wouldn't have been given opportunities because of the color of their skin or their socioeconomic status in life. And so affirmative action wasn't meant to give people opportunities that didn't deserve those opportunities. That is the hugest misconception ever. And when I hear it, it drives me insane, because what that suggests is that affirmative action will take someone who is not qualified. For instance, let's say college, right? So when you are, the light is shining really bright. So people who don't really understand affirmative action will almost believe that you are taking someone who does not have the grades, does not have the SAT scores, the ACT scores, do not have the qualifications, and you're putting them in these phenomenal institutions that they don't belong in. And that's not the case at all. The reason affirmative action was created is because there were black and brown people that were qualified, in some cases overqualified, that were not admitted into these institutions because of the color of their skin. This ideal that it's these super unqualified people and we're just giving them opportunities because we feel sorry for them is asinine. It's ridiculous. And so for people who do not believe racism is real, or racism exists, or racism is not the same as it was in the past, I have several questions. But my main question is, if racism is not real, if institutional racism is not real, systematic racism is not real, explain the wealth gap between black and white in this country. That's one of my major questions. If you can articulate and explain to me the wealth gap in this country and why we have the wealth gap we have in this country between black and white. If you can explain to me the disparity in housing, if you can explain to me the disparity in healthcare, if you can explain to me the disparities in education, explain those things to me. Why are those things so evident? If racism is not a real thing, if everybody just has a fair shot, if that is true, if that is really true, then explain those disparities to me. Also, another thing that I need you to explain to me is black women are one of the most educated subgroups in this country. Black women get college degrees, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, doctorate degrees at a higher level. They're one of the most educated subgroups in this country. However, they are paid the least. If racism is not real, if the systematic oppression is not real, if institutional racism is not real, how do you explain that? How do you explain the most educated subgroup making the least amount of money? How do you explain it? So there's that. And also, you know what, another thing I want to get, because I don't want to forget anything, because I thought about this today at work. In regards to affirmative action and DEI. So DEI is the new boogeyman. It's the new way to say the N-word. It is what it is. I don't hold punches on this page. I'm never going to. So DEI is the new way for people to say the N-word and to basically insinuate that you are not qualified. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. But the way the term has been bastardized, the way the term has been, it's been co-opted. It's been co-opted to mean less than. And just like affirmative action, the reason these things are put into place, because there are certain organizations, because of our systems, there are certain organizations, there are certain places that black and brown people were not allowed in at the same rate because of discrimination. And so these programs were put into place to almost try to rectify those injustices. So another thing I have, in our healthcare system, black women are more likely to die during childbirth than any other race, because there's racism in our healthcare system. And the reason that is because our pain is minimalized. There's almost this ideology that if you're a black woman, you can sustain more pain. You can endure more pain. than anybody else. So when you go to the hospital and you tell them that you're like, you are pregnant, and you tell them, well, you know what, doctor, my body don't feel right. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I just know I don't feel right. I'm scared for my baby. I'm scared for my health. I want to make sure that my baby is healthy and taken care of. A lot of times your concerns are dismissed. When you're having mammograms, I cannot tell you how many times because before you're 40, they give you such a hard time about taking a mammogram. I can't tell you how many times I had to ring the alarm. I had to yell at the top of my lungs because I had a cyst in my breast. At the time, I was 30 years old. And my doctor kept telling me, it's not time to it's not time to do your mammogram. It's not time to do this. And I'm telling her, ma'am, I don't care about your standards. What I am telling you is that I'm experiencing something, and I need you to check into it, and I need you to look into it. And because and not just because some people be like, oh, well, you have to take a mammogram when you're 40. Any kind of pain, any kind of complaint, any kind of concern you have for yourself is minimized, because there's so much racism in our healthcare system. There's racism in our housing. There's racism in our criminal justice system. There is talking too fast. There is racism in these systems. And so instead of trying to fix these issues, there's people in America that wants to say your lived experience is not what you're actually experiencing. You're playing a race card. So what I'm experiencing every day, me navigating this country every day, knowing what I live, knowing what I'm experiencing, I'm being told is not real, because it makes some people uncomfortable. And another thing about privilege, I'll tell you this. So I always say this. People who have extreme privilege, equality feels like oppression to them. So if they have to acknowledge that there's racism, if they have to acknowledge that we have systematic oppression, if they have to acknowledge we have institutional racism, they believe they have to give up something. Because when you acknowledge an advantage, people get afraid that that advantage is going to be taken from them, or that if I acknowledge it and I say, yeah, you know what, white privilege is a thing, racism is real, then they believe it says that they are not qualified and that they don't deserve things, and that those things are going to be taken away from them. And it's the reason we can't get ahead, because people, when they think about racism or bigotry and they think about systematic oppression and all of these things, they think of it in terms of, how is it going to harm me if I have to concede that these things are true? Instead of because we all want equality. No one is asking for preferential treatment. People are asking to be treated equally. And so the clip that I shared with you guys, it resonated with me. It made me all day at work, I couldn't think about anything else, because that woman, her experience is my experience. And I know for sure it's a lot of black women, black men, people of color experience in this country, to be overqualified and to be undervalued. And that's painful. To be told what you're experiencing, what you're going through is not real, because it makes another person uncomfortable, or it makes them feel like they have to relinquish something that their status in life. So I wanted to touch on that. I don't want to forget, because it's like this stuff been in my head all day. So I also wanted to talk about, I was going to talk about unconscious biases, but I no longer want to talk about that, because that's going to I can talk about that topic for a year. I would have this camera rolling all night. So we're not going to talk about that. We can talk about that at a later time. But another topic that I wanted to hit on, legacy versus DEI and affirmative action. So the affirmative action, we talked a little bit about that, is basically to try to rectify our systems, because our systems are, we do have systematic oppression and systematic racism, institutional racism. Those things are real. And so affirmative action came about to give people who are qualified the opportunity to get into spaces that they were not allowed prior to affirmative action. So we have PWIs, which are predominantly white institutions, and we have HBCUs, which is historically black colleges and universities. HBCUs were created because PWIs were not allowing black and brown people into their institutions. So predominantly white institutions were not allowing qualified black and brown people into their institutions. So HBCUs were created to make sure that black and brown people had access to higher education. It wasn't because anything was less, or you're taking people who are not qualified, people who are not educated, people who do not deserve to be there. There were people who met the qualifications, people who were educated, people who had the credentials that were not allowed in certain spaces. So HBCUs were created. So that's that. And now we're going to talk about legacy versus DEI and affirmative action. Legacy admissions is basically your great-grandfather went to this university. So for instance, we're going to say Stanford University. Your great-grandfather went to Stanford University. So your grandfather went, your father went, now you are the son. You get to go to Stanford University because your legacy is at Stanford University. That is a real thing, and it predominantly benefits white people. And it's the reason why Donald Trump and people of his kind is not going to ever touch it. They will go after DEI, they will go after affirmative action, but they will never go after legacy admissions because they know it predominantly benefits white Americans. So if we're talking about fairness, right? We're talking about fairness. We're talking about everybody being treated fair. If affirmative action and DEI is bad, why is legacy not bad? Why is the fact that you can get into a university, you can get a job, you can get things because your family, because your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father, that's not about qualification. That's not qualification. That's the fact that your grandfather, your father, your grandfather, or your great-grandfather, your grandfather, your father, and now you are being admitted into a university because your legacy is there. How is that different than affirmative action or DEI? In fact, affirmative action and DEI requires you to be qualified. You have to have the grades. You have to have the qualifications. Legacy does not require that. It requires you to have a last name. It requires you to come from people with money and resources. So why are people okay with legacy, but they are not okay with affirmative action and DEI? Why is DEI and affirmative action being hunted and gone after, but legacy is not? I have so many questions for people who like to believe that racism is not a real thing. I have so many questions for those people. I can literally, if I were to ever talk and have a conversation with a person who believes that institutional racism is not real, systematic oppression is not real, we would have a conversation for like 7 hours. I have so many questions. Because how do you explain these things? How do you explain the wealth gap? How do you explain the legacy hire versus affirmative action and DEI? How do you explain? I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of questions. And I don't get answers. When I talk to people, I get, you're playing a race card. That's not an answer. It's not an answer. I'm asking you a question and you are unable to answer the question. So the way you try to dismiss my point is by saying that I'm playing a race card. I always say that racism is alive and well, but it does not have to be. People have to have the conversation and start taking action to fix these systems. And therefore, nobody will be able to play the race card because the systems will be fixed. But there's people who don't want the system to be fixed because then their mediocrity will be shown. And they can't have that. So, this clip resonated with me. I think I said that 3 times. The woman name is Ashley. And I didn't know that she had as many credentials as she has. I knew she was very smart, very articulate, but I had no idea she had all of these qualifications and all of these credentials. But if you guys get a chance, watch Abby tonight on CNN. I'm not exactly sure what time she comes on because I go to sleep really early. So I normally watch clips in the morning. Her show is really good because they get into conversations like this and topics like this. And I think these topics are extremely important. It's important that we have them, especially during this administration, and especially at a time like this. The final thing that I'm going to say, and I said it during this video, and I want to say it again because I want to make sure it stick with whomever got to the end of this video. People of extreme privilege find equality. They look at equality as oppression. Because if you used to being on top and getting your way and everything kind of going the way you want it to go, the ideal of other people having a playing field the same as yours is the worst thing that you can imagine. So I'm going to end it here because I'm hungry and I'm ready to eat my lunch. You guys have a great day. Bye.